A siren wailed somewhere beyond the shuttered shops, and frost glittered on the bench like ground glass as a wheelchair's front caster caught on a crack. A single father gripped a paper bag of children's medicine in a trembling hand. A young woman stared at the pavement as if it might swallow her whole. The wind pressed through their coats and made everything feel thinner, sharper, closer to breaking. Before we begin this journey, please subscribe and like so more people find hopeful, values-driven stories. Thank you for being here. He stood under a dead streetlight at 11:41 p.m., breath fogging the night. His name was Noah Hart, and exhaustion weighted his shoulders. He looked toward the bus timetable frozen behind cracked plastic. The last route had ended at 10 p.m. The wheelchair waited beneath the sign like a stranded boat under a collapsed pier. The woman's hands were bare, knuckles reddened by cold. Her face carried hunger, resolve, and something else that unsettled him. It looked like practiced survival. He felt the bag heat up under his palm. His daughter, Lena, lay feverish one neighborhood away. The pharmacy glow hummed behind him. The parking lot was nearly empty. A leaf bounced across concrete like a dry insect. He noticed the woman's shoes, mismatched and soaked. He noticed the jacket too thin for October, zipped only halfway because the zipper tab was missing. He noticed the way she sat, bracing her core for each tiny shift. He recognized pain from a distance. He recognized pride from even farther. He moved closer, then stopped because fear and caution argued in his chest. The night offered no answers. The brain offered lists of reasons to leave. The heart offered one reason to stay. He watched her blink against the wind. She glanced up as if the world still contained faces. At 11:47 p.m., a decision formed, like ice around a twig. It felt fragile and absolute. He reached for it with both hands. He made space in his mind for a stranger on the coldest night he could remember. He understood that turning away would haunt him more than risking awkwardness or judgment. He understood that kindness, like harm, traveled in chains. He returned to his truck with the wheelchair folded in the bed, bundled with bungee cords kept for camping trips he no longer took. He adjusted the passenger seat to lower it. He balanced the paper bag against the dashboard, afraid of crushing the medicine. He kept his eyes on the road and his breathing steady until the heater stuttered into life. He drove past dark houses where families slept. He drove past the school where Lena kept a papier-mâché volcano waiting on a bookshelf. He drove past the corner where grief once staggered him so hard that he leaned on a lamppost until sunrise. The young woman's name was Mara Quinn. She had learned to transfer from chair to seat with the efficiency of repetition. She had learned to hold her shoulders square while questions gathered like sleet. She had learned that people cataloged the chair before the person. Tonight, she had learned that a stranger's hesitation could still end with the truck door opening wide. The house on Sycamore Lane held the warmth of lived-in struggle. A porch light buzzed. A pair of children's soccer cleats leaned against a railing. A plant long past saving stood stubbornly in a ceramic pot. Inside, a hallway lined with construction paper stars led to a bedroom where a 7-year-old breathed through a stuffy nose and clutched a one-eyed rabbit. A framed photograph on a side table captured a woman with windswept hair and a man trying to keep up with her laughter. Grief lived here, but it did not own the deed anymore. Noah checked Lena's temperature at 12:03 a.m., counted 8 slow breaths, and exhaled for the first time in hours. He returned to the kitchen where the kettle hissed and a saucepan rattled. He stirred soup and watched a stray noodle cling to the spoon as if it feared being left behind again. He did not ask for details. He did not offer platitudes. He placed the bowl on the table with quiet hands, then stepped back and let hunger speak its own language. She ate like a person who had bargained with emptiness too often. The night loosened its grip by inches. A blanket from the cedar chest softened into her lap. A spare room accepted the shape of a new body. A bathroom light showed rails that were not ideal but workable. The floor creaked in familiar places. The water heater clicked. The refrigerator hummed. Hope made a temporary camp where it had not planned to stop. At 6:15 a.m., the house awakened in layers. A butterfly nightlight dimmed against the morning. A little girl padded into the kitchen with hair like an unraveled ribbon. She stared at the wheelchair, then at the stranger stirring cereal with careful hands. Children read truth like weather. She felt no alarm. She felt curiosity and a small, startling splash of relief. The universe had moved, just slightly, toward okay. The narration invited viewers to share their city in the comments because stories traveled better when people felt seen on the map. The morning passed in useful rhythms. Noah emailed the school. The volcano presentation could wait. The rabbit received a stitched eye from a sewing kit forgotten in a drawer. A sparking outlet near the kettle found a firm connection after a screwdriver and steady fingers coaxed a loose wire back into obedience. Gratitude gathered like sunlight on a table. None of it felt grand. All of it felt like rescue. At 2:34 p.m., Noah stood in the doorway with a mug warming his palms while mobility maps scrolled on his phone. Ramps were expensive. Doorways were narrow. Systems assumed too much. He started a list titled Immediate Fixes. He added lower rods in closets and textured grip tape on thresholds. He added a shower chair with back support. He added an extra charger within reach of the couch. Small dignity multiplied into big safety when repeated carefully. He found a volunteer attorney number on a scrap of paper tucked into a library book about disability rights. The handwriting was small and neat. The edges were torn as if removed quickly. He placed it on the counter under a magnet shaped like a turtle. He did not pry. He also did not ignore signs that pointed toward trouble. The first week bent time into an unlikely circle. Pain relented just enough to let optimism stretch. Grocery lists included ingredients for soup that tasted like an actual recipe. A remote learning module showed little squares of class faces reacting to a volcano test that would happen next Monday. Promise kept. A neighbor named Mrs. Donner left a casserole with a note referencing her late beagle and the power of casseroles to keep Groof from eating the whole house. The narration invited viewers to type the word hope if they believed ordinary dinners could rebuild wrecked days. On day 9, an envelope slid through the mail slot with no return address. The paper wore the scent of an old filing cabinet. Inside, a photocopy of a workplace accident report sat alongside a typed summary with names blacked out and dates underlined. The summary described a scaffolding collapse at a downtown renovation site 2 years ago. The language felt clinical and wrong. It placed responsibility on a novice apprentice who had supposedly bypassed a lockout procedure. It described policy violations with suspicious confidence. It concluded with a line that bit like ice. Corrective action taken.
Noah studied the lines while pot simmered. He noticed that the underlined date matched the day his late wife's car had been sideswiped by a truck that never stopped. She had been on her way to inspect safety gear at a different site owned by the same contracting group. She had been wearing a hard hat that never saved her from what happened after she left her car to wave down help. That parallel felt like a wire pulled too tight. He shared the envelope with the volunteer attorney after receiving a cautious nod from Mara. A call returned at 7:18 p.m. with a voice that sounded both alert and angry. The attorney mentioned internal memos, missing footage, and a private security subcontractor known for swallowing evidence. The attorney asked for patience while filing requests. Patience already lived in the house. Persistence moved in beside it. By week 3, strength crept back into places where exhaustion lived rent-free. Mara used a resistance band on her quads while Lena colored circuits with wax crayons. Noah practiced listening without rushing toward fixes. The house learned new routes that honored wheels and fatigue. The mirror near the bathroom accepted new routines with a hairbrush. The kitchen learned that cutting boards could be clamped steady for one-handed prep. The porch steps whispered about a ramp and did not feel offended. A notebook appeared on the table with columns and tidy headings. It tracked symptoms, calls, deadlines, and meal ideas that did not rely on canned soup. It tracked Lena's spelling words and the mileage on the truck's tires. It tracked attorney updates and a to-do list titled, "When the Settlement Arrives." The list included a ramp, a wider hallway, a lowered countertop, and a dog with calm eyes. The narration encouraged viewers to comment with one small accessibility improvement they had made at home or work, because change gained traction when collected in numbers. The season shifted with a sudden storm. Rain hammered the roof at 3:02 a.m., and a tree branch scraped the siding like a rough hand. Thunder chased sleep across the rooms. Noah stood at the window with a flashlight and measured from memory the distance to the fuse box. He kept the candle drawer stocked. He kept extra batteries in a labeled bin. He had learned from loss that preparation was love wearing a toolbox. The phone call came at 9:45 a.m. on a Thursday. The attorney's voice held triumph, softened by care. A whistleblower had stepped forward with video clips copied from a corrupted drive. The clips showed a supervisor cutting through a lockout tag with pliers while instructing another worker to resume power. The timestamp matched the collapse. The apprentice followed his last instruction and was thrown against a steel brace when a lift lurched. The clip panned accidentally toward a clipboard with a name badge visible near the edge. The subcontractor's logo appeared on a safety vest in the background. Noah sat down hard before he fell. The name on the badge matched the driver's license of a man who had received a settlement after the hit and run that took his wife. The settlement had been paid by an affiliate of the same contracting group. Paperwork had sealed records under a confidentiality clause stronger than daylight. The coincidence felt too perfect to be natural. The circle felt intentional. The twist twisted tighter. The subcontractor's owner appeared in old photographs within a frame on a shelf that had belonged to Noah's father. The man had once donated to the youth soccer league. The man had once shaken hands with every parent in a row. The man had once learned the shape of the town's trust. This was not just negligence. This was a network that welded convenience to indemnity and called it risk management. Mara's posture held mixed energy, equal parts steel and tremor. Survivor's guilt knocked and demanded rent. She pushed back with careful breathwork that a hospital therapist had taught her. She pushed back with a pencil and paper, drawing a diagram of the site with rectangles for lift positions and arrows for movement sequences approved in training. She labeled everything with crisp letters. She did not apologize for clarity. Lena watched a grown-up world crack and asked if volcanoes sometimes exploded sideways. Noah answered honestly. Pressure found weak paths. People chose how to reinforce the walls. Sometimes they forgot a seam. Sometimes they looked away because looking hurt. The narration asked viewers to share how they stayed brave when institutions failed, because collective courage built pressure against old faults. Their bubble popped the following Monday at precisely 8:02 a.m. A letter from Child Welfare landed with a thud beneath the slot. An anonymous report claimed unsafe conditions for a minor. The phrases lacked details and reeked of coordination. The letter announced a home visit at 12 p.m. Noah tasted panic like metal. He also felt long practice lock his knees. He assembled documentation with the precision of a line cook plating during a rush. He placed the pediatrician's note in a folder. He added attendance records, a signed permission slip, and photos of a science project that looked like organized chaos to adults and pure wonder to children. He added medication logs. He added proof of employment and a schedule that showed covered shifts and reliable neighbors. He stacked repair receipts demonstrating lawful maintenance and safety upgrades. He printed emails with the school counselor confirming Lena's steady progress. He looked at Mara and saw fear she tried to hide behind resolve. Anonymous reports punch holes in dignity first. He promised what he could actually control. He promised documentation and calm. He promised that truth traveled slower than lies, but it lasted longer. At 11:26 a.m., the house smelled like lemon cleaner and baked oats. The counters were clear. The rabbit had a new button eye and sat like a small sentinel on a cushion. The wheelchair route flowed without obstacles. The neighbors on either side had their phones ready to witness if witnessing became necessary. Boundaries formed a perimeter thicker than cinder block. The caseworker arrived at 11:58 p.m., stepped in with soft-soled shoes, and scanned the room with practiced eyes. A tablet logged details. Questions ticked through boxes. Mara answered with facts and no apologies. Noah answered with patience he had earned the hard way. Lena described her volcano in a steady voice and explained that the wheelchair made great laps for holding books during reading time. The caseworker took notes and asked about support networks. Noah mentioned the teacher, the neighbor, the volunteer attorney, and the community center director who ran an inclusive after-school program. The caseworker nodded and scheduled a follow-up. No conclusions were drawn, no threats were made. That should have felt like relief. It felt like the air before a storm. At 5:12 p.m., a black SUV idled across the street with tinted windows that reflected the sagging maple. It remained 20 minutes and then left. Noah logged the time and direction. He sent the information to the attorney. The attorney responded with a single sentence about intimidation tactics that never age well. Silence answered for the rest of the night. Weeks collected like pages turned by a careful hand. Lena returned to school and presented her volcano as if the world had never shaken. The project erupted with foam and laughter. A teacher smiled and wrote a comment about clarity and courage. The rabbit attended in a small backpack and kept secrets. Mara applied for online classes in electrical engineering with a focus on power systems and safety audits. A scholarship committee wrote with cautious interest after reading her personal statement. She described failure modes and human factors without bitterness. She described ramps and doorways without pleading. She described dignity in voltages and switches. She described wanting to design systems that kept people alive on ordinary Tuesdays. Noah worked his shift at the plant and left on time. He stopped taking doubles out of fear that empty hours might swallow him. He traded overtime for presence and survived the pay cut with spreadsheets and virtue stubbornness.
He learned to season cast iron and apologized to pans for past neglect. He learned to enjoy failures that did not threaten anyone, like overbaked biscuits and uneven haircut attempts. The narration invited viewers to comment with one skill they learned after loss, because skill growth often marked the border between surviving and living. A stepladder creaked under a contractor's knee as the new ceiling track glided smoothly across the hallway. A carpentry team measured twice and cut once. Mara directed with a tablet template and a smile that grew larger each day she felt useful. The house shifted from compliance to comfort. The path from door to table became a straight line instead of a zigzag. The porch ramp matched the clapboard trim and looked like it belonged. Belonging mattered more than statements. The settlement negotiations stalled, then lurched forward after a civil investigator leaked an internal email. The email framed risk as an acceptable cost when weighed against bid competitiveness. The phrasing stripped out people and left only liabilities. Numbers replaced names. A graph replaced a photograph. The attorney built a case from those cold pieces. The arc bent toward court and possible accountability. The evening of the family fun night at the community center arrived with sticky floors and bright posters. Children placed stickers on maps to show birthplaces and favorite parks. A bake sale funded a wheelchair basketball team. Noah held a stack of paper cups near the punch bowl and watched Lena invent a game with cones and beandags. Mara explained adaptive layouts to a volunteer architect who nodded and took notes. The room smelled like popcorn and floor cleaner, which somehow equaled safety. At 7:03 p.m., a man in a gray jacket entered with a clipboard and a smile that did not reach his eyes. He introduced himself to staff and drifted toward exits as if mapping procedures for an audit.
He studied the wheelchair-accessible bathroom and took photographs with his phone. He complimented volunteers with a cadence that sounded like training. He left a business card near the donation bowl. The card listed a security consultancy tied to the same network that had swallowed footage at the renovation site. The circles closed like trap jaws. Noah gathered the card and slipped it into an envelope with dates. He counted cameras in the corners and noted blind spots. He noticed a temporary folding partition wired to a circuit without a proper cover plate. He noticed a fire door propped open by a wedge. He made a list for the center director and put his name next to the fixes he could do in a weekend. The director thanked him twice, once with words and once with relief he could feel from a meter away. At 17:18 p.m., a text from the attorney arrived with urgency. A witness had emerged who linked a hit-and-run driver to cash withdrawals aligned with contract payouts. The witness feared exposure. The attorney recommended extra caution. Doors should stay locked. Routes should vary. The SUV appeared again at the end of the block at 9:31 p.m. Two silhouettes sat still behind glass. The next morning started with cinnamon and ended with ash. A small fire broke out in a dumpster behind the plant where Noah worked. The fire suppressed quickly and hurt no one. It still felt like a warning delivered in smoke. The plant manager filed a report and shrugged at the coincidence. Noah did not shrug. He recognized patterns when they repeated too neatly. By late spring, hope became heavier, denser, more metallic. It could be forged into something. It could also drop through a floor if mishandled. The attorney filed motions. The corporation filed counters. The caseworker closed the anonymous report after a final walkthrough at 10:07 a.m., citing a safe, loving environment with adequate supports. A relief wave washed the house clean. It left behind a vigilance that would take longer to recede. On the afternoon of the scholarship interview, the house dressed like it believed in future tense. Mara wore a navy shirt and a calm expression. The laptop perched on a stack of textbooks to align the camera. The interview committee asked about load calculations and ethics. She answered with equations and story. She spoke about redundancy and how redundancy looked like compassion when translated into construction budgets. She finished with a sentence that made Noah close his eyes. Systems were moral choices disguised as technical specifications. She received an acceptance email at 3:42 p.m. with partial funding and a note about further consideration pending documentation. She allowed herself 5 minutes of stillness on the couch with fingers pressed to her eyelids. Then she exhaled and opened a spreadsheet. The future paid for itself only with relentless arithmetic. The narration encouraged viewers to write one goal in the comments and one step they would take this week, because goals hardened when declared. Summer arrived with the smell of hot asphalt and cut grass. Lena dragged a sprinkler across the yard and shrieked at the water's cold bite. The wheelchair tracked loops around the garden like a gentle train. A tomato plant tried to climb the world. A mailbox filled with ordinary mail again. Ordinary felt like a blessing. On a Thursday evening at 6:28 p.m., a Manillet envelope arrived on the porch. Inside lived photographs of a conference table, a handshake, and a folded contract. Under the contract lay a copy of a confidential settlement related to the hit-and-run from years ago. The payee name differed from the driver's legal name by a single transposed letter. The contractor's affiliate approved the payment within 48 hours of a bid award. The dates aligned like a grim ballet. A sticky note carried 2 words and an initial. Enough evidence. K. They decided to print copies and place them in 3 separate places. One set went to the attorney, one set went to a trusted reporter at the regional station with a track record of stubborn truth, one set went into a safety deposit box Noah opened at 10:15 a.m. with hands that would not stop shaking. The knock sounded at 12:01 a.m. on a Monday night bright with moonlight. It came like a gavel. 3 uniformed officers stood behind a woman in a dark suit whose badge clipped level with her collarbone. The suit announced an arrest warrant for fraud in the acquisition of assistance funds. The name on the paper matched Mara's perfectly. The allegations referenced a foundation she had never contacted. The signature on a form looked like a lazy imitation of her hand. The charge description echoed a smear used before against people who complained too loudly. Lena woke to the sound of adult voices and reached for the rabbit. Noah swallowed fire and ice in the same breath. He thought about the SUV with tinted windows. He thought about burnt dumpsters and swallowed footage. He thought about the whistleblower's warning. He thought about the card near the punch bowl. He felt the moment stretch like a cable near snapping. He requested counsel presence and offered documents calmly. The suit's eyes flickered but did not soften. The officers glanced at photographs on the wall. One officer's jaw tightened at the sight of a child's science fair ribbon. The house held itself very still, like a deer waiting to choose between bolt and freeze. The narration asked viewers to take a breath with the family and hold it for 4 counts because solidarity sometimes looked like shared air. A phone on the table buzzed with a text from the attorney. The message contained 1 sentence and an address. The address matched a storage unit facility near the river. The unit number ended with a 7. The message ended with a warning about timing. Another text followed with a single word: now. Noah scanned the room and felt reality tilt, the suit's attention fixed on a form and a pen. The officers watched his hands. Lena stood at the hallway's edge in oversized socks. The rabbit's button eye reflected a point of light. A second knock hammered the door before anyone moved. This one came louder, faster, angrier. The moonlight shifted and headlights swept across the living room through a gap in the curtain. The suit turned her head. One officer stepped toward the pier hole. Tires crunched gravel outside like teeth. A metal thunk echoed from the driveway where the truck had slept for years. The lights cut. The house plunged into a quieter dark, broken only by the hum of a refrigerator and the fast pulse of 4 hearts. The officer at the door stiffened, as if calculating. The suit reached for her radio with clipped urgency. The rabbit slid from Lena's arms and thumped the rug with a soft, startled bounce. Noah moved his body in front of the child like a muscle memory. He measured the distance to the kitchen drawer that held a flashlight and nothing else dangerous. He measured the distance to the hallway where the phone charger waited. He measured the distance to the front door that now separated truth from whatever stood outside ready to test it. The narration invited viewers to share what they believed waited beyond the door and whether the storage unit held a missing piece or a trap, because Part 2 would open that door at 12:02 a.m. and nothing would ever be the same.